Welcome to the Power Up Sessions with me, Darren Smallridge.
And me, Andy KP. And today we thought it'd be a good idea, considering the current situation and what we've been dealing with over the last few months globally, not just locally, that we talk about resilience. It's a key sort of buzzword going around at the moment. You know, how is your resolve when faced with difficulty or mentally or physically challenging times? What are your levels of resilience? That's what we're going to talk about today, aren't we?
And it strikes me, if you're anything like me, the word resilience has been popping up everywhere, all over my social media feeds. On LinkedIn, there are a billion courses that have appeared out of nowhere on resilience. And there are lots of different definitions of resilience. So what we're going to do is talk to you about our understanding of resilience and what it means from the Power Up program perspective, but also both Andy and my individual perspective, because I know we've both got slightly different angles on it. And in this session, we're going to cover 4 or 5 different areas which we think make up human resilience, and we'll deep dive into that. So the first question I've got really for you, Andy, is what's at the heart of human resilience?
Well, I think it's useful to think about what we consider, what our understanding of resilience actually is, say a definition, because for me, it's about how we respond when faced with adversity. Okay, when we have something challenging happen, or something difficult arises that we have to manage, some kind of trauma or tragedy or stressful incident. It's about how we respond to that. So ultimately, I think it's about adaptability. So how quickly can you adapt? Can you readjust? Can you reframe when you are faced with something that is not business as usual, let's face it. So for me, that's the essence of it. I've always thought that the ability to flex or be adaptable is arguably the most important aspect of being a progressive human being, of being a good leader, whether that's leading yourself or other individuals. So I think at the core of it for me is the level to which you can flex, adapt or readjust when faced with adversity. That's the core for me. What about you? What would you say is the essence of what resilience means to you?
Well, what just really struck me then when you were speaking is this idea that the ability to adapt and flex has some presuppositions that sit behind it, I think. And there's the presupposition of acceptance. So accepting what's coming in to you from the outside world, if it's an external event, that allows you then to use the energy in flow, which then allows it to move through you, then you can flex and adapt. The converse to that, the exact opposite, is resistance.
Right. So resistance versus acceptance. That's a great way of looking at it, I think, because I think part and parcel of a strategy that one can utilize when faced with adverse conditions or situations is to accept, to let go of the bits that you cannot directly control or influence. And that acceptance can be either physical or mental or both, I think. Quite often, if you take the most obvious example, the pandemic that's still happening and will be happening probably for some time to come to all of us on this planet, to a certain extent, we have to accept that it's here. We cannot deny the fact. I know there are some conspiracy theories out and about out there that it's the plandemic and so on, but we have to accept that it's here. It's part of life now. And for some people, I think that's really difficult to accept. So you're right, resistance. So you can resist it. I guess that's what the conspiracy theories are around, resisting it, or you can accept that this is the new reality. Now I know what we're dealing with. Then how can I go about managing this situation? So yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it.
And there's another piece in there, isn't there, around resistance, which is about denying something. And I think in the human system, if you look at kind of the various models around change, denial is often the first phase in that. And
certainly at the beginning, isn't it? Yeah. So
right at the beginning. So the very fact is that straight away you're in resistance, because denial is by its very nature a resistance to something. And
pretending it's not happening.
yeah, so denial is the first step of resistance. And there's another phrase, what is it? That which we resist persists. So it requires a lot of energy to resist something. And I notice the people who seem to get burnout or stressed seem to all have one thing in common, that they are resisting the reality of their world and not accepting that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And actually, historically, and across the board, in many places and in many organizations that I've worked in, for example, you have a sense that people believe that acceptance is a sign of weakness. To yield is to give in or give up. But actually, there is a real power and influence to acceptance, which many of these people wouldn't or choose not to understand. Let's put it that way. But I've always considered, the ability to yield, the ability to flex, to change shape, to change form, to change direction, to change your mind, is a key part, is a power, and it's a key part of powerful leadership. Yeah. So, I mean, but I can't remember. They're so innumerable, the number of people that I've met who strongly believe that to yield or to flex is actually shows that you're not strong, that you're not robust. But we all know, and it's a well-known analogy or metaphor, in a storm, the tree that survives is the one that moves with the wind, the sapling, the more flexible specimen, whereas the solid, robust, unmoving oak is the one that goes over when times are tough and when there is adversity or a storm, so to speak.
Yeah, and you'll know that for the last 18 years I've been studying Chinese martial arts, so that reference there really speaks to me. And the symbol of the Shaolin system, which people are familiar with, the Shaolin monks, is that small willow tree, that, and the bamboo that bends and flexes with the wind. And there's something in there around resilience, which is actually those that can bend and flex with the wind, often the ones that survive, because there's an acceptance of the natural flow of things, that the wind will come and the wind will go as the weather comes and the weather goes.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't like the weather, certainly in this country, but in many countries around the world, just wait a while, it will pass. Something else will come along. And similar, I think I have mentioned this in an article I wrote on my website, but basically this pandemic is not the first pandemic to reveal itself on the planet, right? The planet's been through this innumerable times, right? It feels unprecedented, and it feels unique, and it feels, sometimes insurmountable to us because it is immense to us in our experience and in our lifetimes. But the planet has been through it, and it will get through it again. It will pass, and life will continue. Maybe not life as we know it, Captain, but it will continue. It won't be business as usual, because that's never the case anyway, is it? I mean, you've mentioned before in one of your blog posts about unprecedented times, that actually every day is unprecedented. So sometimes we just need to let go. We need to accept that we're constantly in a state of flux and change, and there are certain things we cannot control. So rather than resist, accept.
So there's another thing around with resilience, particularly to do with achievement or attainment of goals. People start to kind of think, oh, this is impossible. I'm never going to be able to do this. And in that, there's a resistance. One of the things I often say, and what we said when we're running our programs, is that there is nothing that you want to achieve in life or want to do, or who you want to be in life, that hasn't already been done. So there's nothing that's impossible whatsoever. So accepting that is almost the first stage to having more resilience. And earlier on, you talked about the flexing in the tree piece, and how people have this perception that yielding is somehow weak. Well, it's the very power that people who work with martial arts work with, because you yield to the power that comes, you accept it fully, and then you give it back double force. That's
so
how you get double force, is to accept it and in.
Yeah, it's how you manage it, isn't it? It's how you regulate it. So you can't deny its existence. You know, as you talked about denial earlier, it is real. It's coming your way. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to change in yourself and adapt so that you can use it to your advantage, rather than to try and either deny its existence or push with all your might against it, and perhaps even then not be able to contain its force. I think an interesting thing for me as well during the sort of the time of this pandemic, this COVID-19, is that obviously for many people, the idea of change, even if it's not even as significant as this current change that we've been experiencing that we're currently experiencing is, find it very difficult. Some people find it extraordinarily challenging to manage change and to adjust and adapt. And then, of course, 3 or 4 months after lockdown, everything starts to ease and revert to some sense of how things were before. And those people then have to go through the whole process again. You mentioned one of the stages of the change curve, the transition curve, you know, so the whole process starts from scratch. And so if you do have more of a difficult time when it comes to change, you know, it can just feel like one battle after the next. And whereas if you are very open-armed to change, and you actually thrive on it, it can be easy to readjust, to go into lockdown, for example, and to come out of it and to feel positive about that whilst it's going on. But then, of course, there are other elements where those sort of two tendencies will be flipped around, because people who tend to be accepting of change and are able to easily readjust tend to be more extroverted. So actually, if they are cut off from other people, that's the challenge for them, because they thrive naturally on being in a social setting, in a face-to-face situation. And whereas the introverts, who arguably and traditionally are the people who need a longer transition when it comes to accepting change, you know, they could more easily accept a remote way of interacting or existing. So there's lots of contradictions and forces working against each other. But ultimately, it all comes down to to the fact that how much resolve do you have when it comes to dealing with these changes
and challenges. And, you know, there's a piece around for me about expectations and resilience, and when my expectations of the future so wildly different from the reality that I'm experiencing. So as an example right now is, I expected that, you know, I'm recording this from home and I have children, and my expectations were that my children would remain quiet in the garden or in the house for the entire recording. And I've just been aware that as you were talking that I could just hear them both screaming in the background. And I noticed my mind going, I want them to be quiet. And I noticed the moment I did that, in my head, I started to feel a level of tension and anxiety. And for me, anxiety is my thoughts of the future and things going wrong in the future, which gives me panic and anxiety in the present.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that applies to all of us, doesn't it? That if you project yourself forward, thinking about what might or what might not transpire, or indeed if you sling yourself back into the past, considering what happened the last time, you know, one of your children interrupted one of your recordings and the impact that had, you know, rather than staying in the moment and just accepting what is here and now, because that is all that exists. You know, some would argue that's all that we have. And actually, if you're projecting yourself forward or slinging yourself back, you're wasting energy on things that either, you know, have already passed or may not actually even yet happen, or might not happen at all. So I think being in the present moment is another way for me of developing resolve and resilience when faced with uncertainty, when faced with adversity. So easier said than done for some, but for many people, they would find being in the present moment and being in a total place of acceptance, or a place of total acceptance, incredibly challenging. So how do you do that? You know, if you're not used to it, how do you manage such a task? And I tell you what, the other day, a friend and colleague, sometimes colleague, not at the moment because there isn't much work around, as you said, or it's all been digitalized. she talked to me about this metaphor of floating, and it really resonated with me, because any metaphor that's got something to do with water has a real resonance for me. I have a real affinity with being in water or near it, and it really hit the nail on the head for me. When the waters are, unsettled, just float, rather than fight for your life to try and keep yourself on the surface and paddling away, working very hard with little in terms of results. We are human beings, and the human spirit, the human body as well, they are designed to be fairly robust. We float naturally in water if your breathing is steady and not out of control. And also the human spirit is very buoyant, I think, if you are able to accept, let go, and trust rather than stress. So there's a real sort of difference between those two, isn't there? If you are having to deal with something untoward, that's challenging, that's difficult, you have a choice. Do you stress about it, or do you trust that actually, it could turn out okay? Rather than thinking, what if everything went terribly wrong? How about reframing that as, what if everything went pretty okay or fairly all right? It's a big difference between that and terribly wrong. But yeah, floating. So I've often thought that, letting it happen is a good thing, and it's a powerful thing. It's a powerful place to be. But for some people, I think that would be a challenging thing to actually put into practice. So how will you do that? I mean, any idea?
Well, when you talk about floating, then another famous metaphor is that the hummingbird has to flap its wings millions of times to appear to be still, and the ducks that look so graceful across the pond are actually frantically flapping underneath, right? So which one is resilience? Is it actually the act of pure acceptance in the glide and the floating? Because it sounds very elegant, this idea of floating and being at one with the water as a metaphor there. Whether the water might be choppy on the surface, but deep down under the ocean, it's all very calm and quiet. So where are you placing your attention? On the surface or deep down underneath? Are you placing your attention in the future? As you said, it drains your energy. And resilience is about the ability to maintain and regenerate your energy, particularly when the waters get choppy, to not be at the choppy end of the water, to manage to get yourself down below the surface of the water and not allow your state to be affected by the external environment conditions.
Yeah, I suppose it's about being rooted or grounded, right? And a lot of approaches to mindfulness or generating greater presence, various meditative practices. A lot of the exercises I'm familiar with certainly are focus on grounding yourself, rooting yourself to the earth beneath you. So yeah, so the roots of a tree. We've already talked about metaphors that you can use involving trees, but or the deep depths of the ocean. So you don't have to go that far down for everything to slow down and just be very still. Somewhat murky in places, and the further you go down, the more unusual the creatures you might find down there too. Yeah, but it's true. On the very surface, though, it can appear like Armageddon. It can appear like the Earth, the planet, or the world as we know it is about to end. But down below, it's not the case. Yeah, maybe there's something in that, in terms of, and so there's a key theme, isn't there, between the things we've been talking about, because we talked about the fact that the pandemic we're experiencing now is all consuming for the people on the planet currently, but in terms of the Earth, it's one of these, another one of these. We had one, a few decades ago. We had a big one 100 years ago. We've had countless number of these throughout the history of the planet. So yeah, it's how far out do you project in terms of the bigger picture, or do you just focus on the surface above water, or the trees, branches in the wind, the immediate response or reaction you have to what's going on around you, or do you look at the long game?
So there's a number of key themes coming up then around acceptance, first of all, allowing it to flow through you, which gives you that sense of floating, focusing your attention on the present rather than the future going wrong. So if you are going to focus on the future, focus on the future as what will be will be. And that allows you to accept the things you are doing may turn out the way you expected, they may not. And whilst it seems awful right now, on the grand scale of things, it probably, when you look back, will feel pretty small in comparison to the next challenge you're dealing with.
Yeah, and that makes me think of a third element. So we've talked about presence, we've talked about acceptance, and I think also purpose comes into it. So it's good to think in terms of what will be, but actually we do have more influence over what that might entail than perhaps we necessarily think. So I think although it's good to accept, we can also influence our future, what our story might contain, what the next twist or turn in the narrative might be. So it's good to get back in touch with your purpose, or find it for the first time if you don't know what it is. Find out what your purpose is, do some exercises, consult with your friends, or get some help to help you find why you're here. Why are you on the planet? What are you good at? What's the gift or set of gifts that you have for those around you? Nourish it. And then, or also, I think this is a convenient time to redefine it. If you feel that this event has been of a scale enough to, change the way you see the world or the way you see yourself, why not redefine your purpose and the direction you want to take? So as well as thinking, it's about acceptance, it's about thinking what will be, and even though I have goals and aspirations, they might not turn out exactly how I would ideally want them to. That if we put some planning and preparation in and do set ourselves some goals, having in mind what it is that we want to bring in terms of value, what our purpose is. Combination of the two, I think, is probably a realistic way forward. But yeah, why not? Why not re-examine right now? It's a good time to do that. A lot of people are.
Yeah, you're right. When we use phrase like acceptance, there is one side of it where you kind of just go, nothing I can do. But actually, that's not what we're saying. We're saying accepting the thing for what it is, and then using your power as a human being, your mindset, your energy to shape it, to influence it. Bruce Lee, put the water in the cup, it becomes the cup. Put it in the bottle, it becomes the bottle, So be like water. Actually,
right, yeah.
I love how this is coming together, the water metaphors of the sea, shaping the water. And water is the most powerful resources on the planet.
Yeah, and think about it. When you if you had some water in your hand, if you hold it like that, you retain it, much more of it. The more tension you put in and squeeze it, what happens to the water? It dissipates. It falls through your fingers. So it's not resisting against it. It's holding on to it. So which kind of goes against what we're saying in terms of acceptance. But it's taking the shape of the hand, or your hand is forming the shape of. I don't know where I'm going with that one. But it's true though, isn't it? When you squeeze your hand, the water will just.
But that's about that's about body. That's about energy and flow and tension. Because if water is one of the most valuable resources on the planet, you've got it in your hand. You tense up, you lose it.
Yeah.
Same with peace, calm, acceptance, quiet. The moment we become tense, we lose those things, and that's the exact opposite of resilience. So if you want to be more tense, more stressed, more anxious, less resilient, just tighten your body up much more and tighten your breathing up. So if you're listening to this, make sure that if you want to be less resilient, that those are the things you do. Or if you want to be more resilient, relax, breathe, accept, feel the float, feel the flow.
Yeah, I think that's sage advice. I think, coming back to one of the initial points, it's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. So But you know, we're all different, so there are different approaches that are going to work for different people, and how you may achieve that letting go or that acceptance, how you might achieve the level of presence we're talking about, rather than dwelling on the past or projecting yourself forward, and how you get in touch with your purpose or identify what it is or redefine it. That will differ depending on who you are and what your preferences are, what your outlook is, and so on. There are so many different factors involved. But it starts with the self, doesn't it? It starts with you. So it's got to be a desire there to begin with, and it's almost as if you've got to make a deal with yourself, right? To work out, first of all, what it is you're going to do to ensure that you are resilient or you remain resilient, and then it's about ensuring that you actually put that into practice and maintain it once you get going with it. But it will be different depending on who you are and, you know, what your experience thus far has been. In fact, we call it making a pact with yourself, don't we, on the Power Up program?
We do. I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly what I was going to say. PACT is a principle that we work with on our program, and PACT stands for P is perceive. So we talked about this, what your perception of the world is will determine how you see the world.
Yeah, and in fact, what we prefer and what we strongly recommend is that rather than be judgmental at this end, we are perceptive. So a lot of people in the world are very judgmental about, you know, think about some of the things that are going on in the world right now. People being judged on the color of their skin, on the politics that they follow or adhere to, you know, even by what music they listen to, what job they do, and the list goes on and on. People are very judgmental, but it's much more powerful to be perceptive without judgment. And in fact, judgment is something that I've been thinking about recently, because somebody the other day, I realized that people are not just judgmental about other people, they're judgmental about different species in the animal kingdom. The other day, one of my neighbors was moaning about wood pigeons and saying they were the bane of her life. And I actually find them quite amusing. And then another family member was really negative about jackdaws and saying they're really, what do you say? They're bullies, those jackdaws. And I thought, the jackdaws I see in my garden, they're quite entertaining, a bit boisterous at times. And it's a very easy trap to fall into. You know, one person behaves in a certain way, you color an entire, you know, species with it, or an age range with it, or you know, and yeah, it just struck me the other day when I heard that, when people were talking about birds. So rather than be judgmental, let's get more perceptive, move away from judgment, promote greater understanding by perceiving what's really going on. So that's what the P of PACT is about.
Yeah. So the A is either awareness or awaken, but both speak to the idea that we awaken our senses to what's really going on for us in our felt experience. So we experience the world as human beings through our senses, through our feelings. So anytime you get a feeling, whether it's a happy feeling or what you might judge as a negative or a sad feeling, there's usually an associated thought process that's gone with it. So going back to the P in perceive, it's very likely that if you're feeling sad and anxious, the way you're perceiving the events that are happening are negative. So you might be having negative thoughts like, this is going to go wrong. That jackdaw is a bully. Maybe they're going to bully me next. And you can connect the two. They're intrinsically linked. Our feelings are a direct result of the thoughts we're having, the way we perceive the world or our life situation. So if you awaken your senses to that, you start to offer yourself choice. Do I actually want to feel like this? Is this serving me? Is this a resourceful state to be in?
Yeah, that's right. And you can't, if you do want to choose a different path or choose a different response to whatever stimuli we're talking about, then you have to become aware of it first. How can you possibly choose from something when you don't know what the choice is, right? You couldn't go into a restaurant and order something, you know, without looking at the menu first, because you need to know what the restaurant is serving you. So you cannot possibly change or transform something which you are not aware of. So P is perceive, the A is awakening your awareness.
The C is create. So when we get into the state of flow, we get into the state of creation. And one of the keys to resilience is about create new possibilities, new opportunities, rather than getting stuck in the negative flow of things. So C is about creation. Whenever we get into a positive energy flow, energy state, we notice the natural flow of things, the tides, the wind, the sunrise, sunsets, the natural order, natural flow of creation. And that facilitates the T, which, Andy, you know what this is.
I do. So you create the path you want to take. You create, having chosen what it is, and then finally, by going through all those stages of PACT, you get to the T, which is transform. So you achieve your greater purpose. We mentioned purpose earlier, and transformation is about unlocking your true value, your true worth. It's about fulfilling your dreams. It's about becoming who you want to be rather than who you are, right? Or who you've become. So it's conscious, rather than relying on other people shaping our destiny. It's about taking full control yourself and working out, exactly what it is you need to become, who it is you want to be. So this transformation, it's not changing yourself from one thing to another. It's transforming everything so that you become something new. Okay. We talk about change on our Power Up program as something that is often talked about as a positive, and often talked about in terms of something that we must all sort of consider and think about when we're developing ourselves. But actually the problem with change is that there's the potential to change back. So when we talk about transformation, there's nothing temporary about it. Transformation is permanent. Now you think about a butterfly as it develops through its various stages of its life. When it transforms into a butterfly, it doesn't turn back. It becomes a butterfly, okay, until its dying day, which is normally the same day, isn't it? Not the day after. But you see what I'm saying? There's a difference between change and transformation. And what we're concerned with on the Power Up program is permanent change, is transformation. Okay, we're not concerned about taking people through the motions. We're really focused on transformation in people's lives that makes a huge difference, so that they can really become who they want to be.
So we're almost out of time for this episode of the Power Up Sessions, and what I really love is kind of talking through some of those kind of esoteric and existential processes that we talk about between you and I, Andy, but also on our programs. But also there's a truth within that, and I feel it when I'm listening to you speak about accepting and feeling a flow and floating, that actually resilience is something not to be attained, but is already within me as a human being, and that there are things that I do that get in the way or interfere with my resilience that make me less resilient. So if I let go of those things and get them out of the way, I automatically get back to my natural state, which is strong, powerful, resilient, yielding in the positive sense, in order to then recharge, regenerate, and give back my true purpose and meaning in the world.
Yeah, so remember, be present. We've talked about the benefits of doing so and being so. Accept and find your purpose, or redefine it, or remind yourself of it. So let's leave it there. It's been fantastic sharing some thoughts with you, Darren, and discussing some of these subjects that, some of which are, there's a lot more discussion to be had from them. And we wish everyone continued success in their endeavors to maintain their resolve and resilience in these difficult times. I'll see you in the next session.